What if the answer to the most baffling unsolved mysteries isn't buried deep in complex theories, but hidden in plain sight? A single, overlooked detail. We're about to dive into infamous cold cases, not to recount the facts you already know, but to pinpoint that one elusive piece. A discarded clue, a subtle inconsistency, a forgotten moment, if brought to light, could definitively crack the code and solve the unsolvable. The Zodiac Killer, the disappearance of Amelia Earhart, the Black Dahlia. These names echo through history, shrouded in mystery and speculation. For decades, they've been labeled unsolvable, leaving a trail of frustration for investigators and endless fascination for the public. We've heard the stories, we know the main players. But what if we've all been looking at the puzzle with a missing piece? Today, we're not just revisiting these cases, we're hunting for that single, overlooked detail that could change everything. Let us start with a case that has captivated and horrified people for over half a century. The Zodiac Killer. We all know the basics. A string of brutal murders in Northern California in the late 1960s and early 70s. A taunting killer who sent cryptic letters and ciphers to the press, and a prime suspect, Arthur Lee Allen, who was never charged. The investigation fixated on the ciphers, the handwriting, and Allen's strange behavior. It became a maze of complex theories and circumstantial evidence, ultimately leading nowhere. Many people assumed the key must be in cracking the final, unsolved ciphers, or finding a new DNA sample. But what if the most crucial clue was dismissed right at the beginning? Now, for the aha moment. Let's talk about the missing link. In the Zodiac case, it might not be a cipher, but a sound. Specifically, the voice. During one of the most famous Zodiac calls to the police, the dispatcher described the killer's voice as slow and deliberate, almost rehearsed. Yet, one of the few survivors, Brian Hartnell, who spent considerable time with the killer, described his voice very differently as a normal, young-sounding voice. This glaring inconsistency was often brushed aside. Why? Investigators were overwhelmed with tips and physical evidence, and eyewitness testimony, especially from a traumatized victim, can be fallible. It's a classic example of cognitive bias, focusing on the tangible letters and prints while dismissing something as subjective as a voice description. So, how does this change everything? If we take Hartnell's description as the more accurate one, it completely alters the profile of the killer. The slow, taunting voice on the phone calls could have been a deliberate disguise, an act. This means we shouldn't be looking for someone who naturally speaks that way. It reframes the phone calls, not as a genuine representation of the killer, but as a calculated piece of theater. This opens up the suspect pool, far beyond those known to have a specific vocal cadence. It suggests a more cunning and self-aware perpetrator, someone who understood how to manipulate perceptions from the very start. The real Zodiac wasn't just a monster. He was a performer, and the voice on the phone was his greatest act of misdirection. Next, we fly into the vast, empty expanse of the Pacific Ocean to confront the enduring mystery of Amelia Earhart. The official story is simple. On July 2nd, 1937, Amelia Earhart and her navigator Fred Noonan disappeared while attempting to circumnavigate the globe. The accepted theory is that they ran out of fuel, crashed into the ocean, and sank without a trace. The search focused on their projected flight path and the deep waters around Howland Island. The public imagination was captured by the tragic image of a heroic aviator lost to the unforgiving sea. Think about it. What's your immediate image of the Earhart mystery? It's probably a plane sinking into blue water, right? That's the story we've been told. But what if they didn't crash into the ocean at all? The missing link here is a series of over 100 radio distress calls. In the days and weeks following Earhart's disappearance, numerous credible sources, from amateur radio operators across the globe to the U.S. Navy, reported hearing faint, desperate calls for help. The messages were fragmented, but they seemed to indicate that Earhart and Noonan had landed, not crashed, and were broadcasting from an island. These calls were largely dismissed at the time as hoaxes or misinterpretations. Why? The technology was limited. Verifying the source was difficult, and the official search was already committed to the crash and sink theory. It was easier to believe they were gone forever than to chase after what seemed like radio ghosts. Let's see how this domino falls. If we accept the radio calls as genuine, the entire narrative shifts. Earhart and Noonan weren't at the bottom of the ocean. They were castaways. This new reality points directly to a specific location. Gardner Island, now known as Nick. It was uninhabited, on their flight path, and had a large, flat reef, perfect for an emergency landing. Suddenly, we have a new timeline and a new search area. The mystery is no longer about finding a needle in a 1,000-mile haystack of ocean. It's about finding evidence of survival on a tiny atoll. This hypothesis is supported by artifacts later found on the island, including remnants of a woman's shoe from the 1930s and a sextant box. The distress calls weren't hoaxes. They were the final, fading echoes of a fight for survival that the world simply was unequipped to hear at the time. Finally, let's turn to Hollywood's most infamous cold case. The Black Dahlia. In 1947, the bisected body of Elizabeth Short was found in a Los Angeles lot. The gruesome nature of the crime and her nickname, the Black Dahlia, created a media frenzy. The investigation was massive, with hundreds of suspects and countless false confessions. The focus was on her last known movements, her romantic entanglements, and the surgical precision of the crime, which led many to believe the killer had medical training. The case became a tangled web of Hollywood secrets and dead-end leads, solidifying its place in true crime lore as the ultimate unsolvable murder. We assume the killer was some lone, sadistic genius who vanished without a trace. But here's the crack in the facade. The overlooked detail isn't about who killed her, but about where she was killed. The body was found completely drained of blood, yet there was no blood at the crime scene. This means she was killed elsewhere. Her body was cleaned and posed, and then transported to the lot. This much is known. But the missing link is the implication asterisk of this fact. Transporting a body in 2 pieces without leaving a trail isn't a one-person job, especially in 1947. It requires a vehicle, a private space to commit the murder and dissection, and a cool-headed accomplice to help move and stage the body. Why was this overlooked? The narrative of the lone, brilliant killer, like a real-life Hannibal Lecter, is more compelling. Police were focused on finding a single individual, a monster, and the idea of a conspiracy or multiple people being involved complicates the investigation exponentially. Let's reconstruct reality with this link. The murder of the Black Dahlia wasn't the work of one person, but at least 2. One person with the motive and rage to kill, and another who helped with the gruesome aftermath and disposal. This instantly changes the entire profile. We're no longer looking for a phantom surgeon who did everything himself. We're looking for a pair, or even a small group. This could explain why the case went cold so quickly. With 2 or more people, they can provide alibis for each other and keep each other's secrets. The focus on a single perpetrator meant investigators may have interviewed the right people but failed to see the connection between them. The killer wasn't a ghost. He had help, and that helper is the key to unlocking the entire conspiracy of silence that has surrounded this case for over 70 years. From Aquila's disguised voice to a castaway-esque radio calls to the logistics of a gruesome crime, we've seen how a single, overlooked detail can completely reframe our understanding of the unsolvable. Greatest breakthroughs often don't come from a new piece of technology.